This week in our Christmas Around the World series, we traveled to Germany, where many of our Advent traditions have their origins. Advent is a period of 4 Sundays before Christmas in which we prepare for Christmas, which starts at sundown on December 24th and goes for 12 days after that. Our modern culture often jumps right into Christmas, skipping over Advent entirely, and then we kind of skip Christmas too, by packing everything up on Boxing Day or the 27th, and ignoring the fact that Christmas runs for 12 days until January 6th. Yet our German siblings in faith have a number of Advent traditions that can help us to slow down and observe this special period of preparation in the Christian calendar. This time set aside to get our hearts and our lives and our homes ready for the arrival of the Messiah. This is what John the Baptist is announcing in the wilderness, as we heard in our scripture passage this morning. As Angela and Izzy already mentioned, the Advent wreath, or the Advent Kranze, comes from Germany. Many German families have Advent wreaths in their homes as well as their churches that they light each Sunday during Advent. And the candles are often red rather than blue or purple, which is common here. Like many of our Advent and Christmas traditions, this one may have pagan roots. Germanic tribes before Christianity often used a ring of fire around the time of the winter solstice. But whatever its specific origins, the symbols of light represented by candles, life represented by the evergreen branches, and God's never-ending love represented by the circular nature of the wreath itself remain powerful for us today. Similar symbolism, without the circular wreath part, is found in the Christmas tree, which also comes from Germany. Bringing evergreen trees into the home in the winter was a very long-standing German tradition. No one knows exactly what the origin of it was. Protestant reformer Martin Luther is credited, based on legend, with being the first to add lights to the tree in the form of candles, after he was out for a walk and was awed by the stars sparkling amongst the evergreens one winter's evening. As a child, I remember being fascinated that my uncle's tree, my uncle grew up in Germany, had real candles on it, that they only lit Christmas Eve, because if your tree has real candles on it, it requires constant, close supervision. I always wanted to see those candles lit, but we were never there. We were always there on Boxing Day, never on Christmas Eve. Germany is also the origin of Advent calendars, which help us to mark down the days towards Christmas. And this year, commercial Advent calendars are actually right. They start on December 1st, regardless of when the first day of Advent is, and today is Sunday, December 1st. So Advent runs from December 1st to 24th this year. Other German Advent traditions include Christmas markets, called Christkindlesmarkt, in which Christ Child markets, which take place in the city center of most major German cities during Advent. Gingerbread cookies and houses, marzipan, stollen, and mulled wine. Christmas angels, which are commonly made of painted wood and are among the most beloved Christmas decorations that are put not just on the tree but all around the house. And writing letters not to Santa, as children commonly do in North America, but to the Christ child. Germans also celebrate the Feast of St. Nicholas, or Nikolastag, on December 6th, which also always falls during Advent. The Feast of St. Nicholas is actually the origin of our Santa Claus traditions, but Germans don't have Santa Claus bring gifts on December 25th. In some places in Germany, the Christ child or the Christmas man does bring gifts on the 25th, but that is actually a relatively new tradition. St. Nicholas continues to be remembered early in Advent on December 6th, and on his feast day, small gifts are given to children, often candy, either left in their shoes or under their pillows, depending on local custom. The Feast of St. Nicholas remembers Nicholas of Myra, who was a bishop in what is now Turkey in about the 3rd century of the current era. There are no existing writings by Nicholas or from anyone who was alive at the time he lived, but there are legends from the 6th century which report his generosity to the poor and needy. One story talks about how a man with 3 daughters had fallen into poverty and did not have money to pay for dowries for his daughters, meaning that they could not get married. Nicholas is said to have thrown 3 bags of gold from his inheritance from his wealthy parents through a window to pay for the dowry for each of the 3 daughters on 3 consecutive nights. In some of the versions of this legend, the bags of gold fall into socks that were hung by the chimney to dry overnight, or into shoes left by the door. Another story tells how he saved 3 men from execution, and still another how he had sailors who were transporting wheat for the Roman Empire unload part of their cargoes so that the people of Myra would not starve during a famine, while guaranteeing that they would not be punished when they arrived in Rome for short shipment. The result of this assortment of legends is that in various parts of Europe, Nicholas is the patron saint of sailors, merchants, archers, repentant thieves, prostitutes, children, brewers, pawnbrokers, and students. In some ways, the legends surrounding St. Nicholas remind us of the words of John the Baptist when asked what people should do to get ready for the Messiah. If you have 2 coats, share with someone who doesn't have any. Be honest, be kind to others, don't be greedy. Both Nicholas and John the Baptist remind us that one of the ways in which we prepare for the coming of the Messiah, one of the ways in which we make room in our hearts and our lives for the birth of God in our midst, one of the ways in which Christians get ready for Christmas, is by practicing kindness and generosity. In our consumer culture, it is helpful, if sometimes uncomfortable, to remember that getting ready for Christmas is not about decorating the fanciest tree, or making the biggest feast, or buying the best presents. It's about sharing and inclusion. It's perfectly okay to decorate, to prepare special food, and to give presents. But we also need to ask ourselves, what are we doing to help those who are on the margins in our community and in the world? If we have 2 coats, who might need one? As Angela already mentioned, as a community of faith, we have been challenged to think about this in a different way over the past few weeks, when some of us have encountered someone asking for money outside the church as they arrive or leave. His name is Brian, and thanks to research done by someone on our leadership team, we have learned that he lives in a residential support home here in Portage. I know I was relieved to know that he does have a warm place to stay on those cold nights, as well as meals. When I met him last Sunday, I wondered if he was homeless, and if there was some way that we might help him more substantially than giving a few dollars. Nevertheless, his presence amongst us on Sunday mornings reminds us tangibly of the need that exists in our community. More than 1/4 of the population of Portage la Prairie lives in poverty. So Brian is not the only struggling person in Portage, and he may not be the only person you encounter asking for money or other concrete help around town either. Such encounters can be uncomfortable, so I want to start by saying it's okay to be uncomfortable. I'm pretty sure that John the Baptist made many people uncomfortable. Heck, he still makes me uncomfortable 2,000 years later. And we know that Jesus made people uncomfortable too by challenging their expectations and inviting them to live differently. Encountering someone living in poverty or struggling for whatever reason is not an easy thing. It can pinch our souls to see the suffering of someone else, and it can make us aware of our own privilege. Yet such pinches are an invitation to turn towards the person, not away. It is not fair to blame the person we meet for our discomfort. That kind of discomfort is our responsibility to deal with. And I know that's not always easy. Our culture tends to tell us to fear those who are different, especially when we don't know them and we are feeling uncomfortable. How quickly discomfort can turn to fear or judgment. But discomfort doesn't have to make us fearful. We can acknowledge this discomfort and choose to not let fear or judgment get in the way of our shared humanity. You see, our faith tells us that we are all children of God, and we are to look for the face of Christ in every person we meet, no exceptions. Part of how we see Jesus amongst us still today is by looking for God, not just in the faces of our friends and family, but also in the stranger we meet along life's road. We need to treat each person we meet just as we would want to be treated should we find ourselves in a similar situation. And we need to acknowledge that we could find ourselves in such situations. To be human is to be vulnerable. So that means that first and foremost, we need to be kind and respectful, and we need to acknowledge our common humanity. Many people who have been homeless at some point in their lives report that the most painful part of the experience was that people wouldn't look them in the eye. People walked by as if they were invisible or crossed the street to avoid talking to them. So if you meet Brian outside the church, smile and say hi just like you would if you encountered a church friend or your next door neighbor in the grocery store or elsewhere around town. Our faith also tells us that if we have an abundance, we should share. If we have 2 coats, we should give one to someone who needs it. If we have ample food, we should help feed others, and so on. How we decide to do that will vary. Brian's caseworker suggests that giving him money is not the best idea, and each of us is free to decide what we want to do with that advice. It is perfectly fair to simply say, "Sorry, not today," if he asks you or if he or anyone else asks you for money. A respectful no is a perfectly acceptable answer. It's not okay not to give money. It's okay not to give money on a particular day or to even have a personal approach to giving which doesn't include giving money to people who ask for it directly on the street. We don't have to say yes every time someone asks for something. In fact, being able to say no when we need or want to can help us to say yes in a spirit of generosity rather than with resentment. What we cannot do is to stop caring about the well-being of others that we meet along life's way. If you are living in poverty yourself, you may not have the financial resources to share at this time. That's okay and not anything that anyone should ever feel badly about. However, if you are not living in poverty, think about how you might share with others. Can you contribute to white gifts that will be collected next week for our families in our community? Could you bring food for the food bank in the new year or volunteer at the soup kitchen when the need is often great because people spend a larger portion of their very limited resources on heating costs? Can you support programs like the CMHA or Turning Leaf or Coats for Kids or Habitat for Humanity or Rest a Bit? That's not even close to an exhaustive list of the many groups that are doing good work here in Portage. So please keep your ears open for opportunities that seem like they have your name on them, that you have the particular gifts or particular resources that are in need at that moment. Again, not everyone can or should support all of these programs, but if we each look for a place or two where we could offer something, either in terms of volunteer time or money or both, it is amazing what a difference we could make in this community. As a people striving to live in God's way, it's okay to be uncomfortable. It's okay to be uncertain. It's okay not to know for sure how to respond to the needs of the world. It's okay to make mistakes. But this Advent, let us prepare anew for the coming of the Messiah amongst us by following the examples of St. Nicholas and St. John the Baptist, and living with kindness and generosity so that everyone we meet might have a Freie Weihnachten. May it be so. Amen.